some like haunted, mythical creature thing. You aren't even supposed to say its name. It rhymes with Wendigo. But we're here to see something, right? So Wendigo, 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 Wendigo!
Hello everybody, welcome back to Screenstars. I'm here today to bring you my review for the 2022 found footage horror film, The Wendigo. The film is directed by Jake Robinson, who also stars in the film along with Hunter Redfern, Tyler Jean and Taylor Grace Davis. Now, the film has, it follows a popular streamer, I suppose, who goes into the woods in order to try and find the mythical creature, the Wendigo, or the Vendigo. And we see on camera him being attacked by something and dragged off. Then there are a group of content creators who do very similar things to Logan, the guy who was dragged off. They all seem to know each other, and they decide to go out to the same location to try and find out what happened to him. When they get there, they discover an unpleasant secret in the woods that puts everybody's lives in danger. Right. What are my thoughts on the Wendigo? Well, again, I feel like I say this all the time when I do a found footage film, but I'm going to say it again. I love found footage. I generally can get a lot of enjoyment from a lot of found footage films. I think if you follow a certain blueprint and when you're doing like a found footage film, you don't necessarily need to have any kind of budget. That has been proven many, many times before with a found footage film. You can make a nice, glossy, high-budgeted found footage film, and you know it won't sometimes be anywhere near as effective as a film made for 5% of the budget, if you like. So I don't have a problem with low-budget found footage films, and this is exactly that. It is a really low-budget found footage film. It's been stripped right back, and at times the budget absolutely shows up in this film, and it's, I don't know, the film just doesn't exactly land with me, this one. It just didn't necessarily affect me the way it was supposed to. It wasn't particularly frightening. There were a couple of moments here and there. I mean, this kind of presents like this Vendigo as like a spirit that kind of possesses you, sort of thing. I mean, I've seen a few like Wendigo horrors, and it kind of presented slightly different in many films. Well, this is more like a kind of a spirit that kind of possesses people, sort of thing, and kind of slowly starts turning them into the Wendigos. That's the impression I'm getting anyway. So there are a couple of shots here and there of like people kind of being possessed by it, if you like, and starting to slowly turn, that look decent, you know what I mean? And I think if the film would have focused on that a little bit more, I think we could have had more scares here. But what we actually get is a lot of shots of the camera facing on the floor. We get characters getting angry for some reason, and I couldn't exactly figure out why. It was almost like they had to have scenes where there were conflict between these people out in the woods, and couldn't necessarily figure out what the conflict was. The characters weren't necessarily introduced well, so I didn't care for any of them. I didn't even care for this Logan guy right at the beginning, who you see being dragged off. He seemed quite an abrasive character, so I half of me quite enjoyed seeing him getting dragged off. But the film after that, we're introduced to these characters that are going into the woods to look for this guy who they supposedly all know. Well, you get the impression that the majority of them are really only going in there to pursue, to further their own careers, really. So they all kind of come across as self-serving, and there's nobody here. Again, like, the films like this live and die, I think, on character development. Especially when you've got such a small budget to work with here. I think if we'd have had characters here that anybody cared about at all in any way, shape, or form, you might have had some kind of attachment to it. But as it happened, it just felt like, at times, literally just like nameless, faceless characters running around woods with a camera. And that, for me, is when found footage starts to become at its worst. When A, I don't care about the characters, and B, it might be following a format, but it almost feels like it's at times doing it, following a certain format because it doesn't know what else to do. It's almost like, well, if I flail the camera about a bit here and there, I'll get away with this, that, and the other. So it's confusing at times. And it's, I don't know, sometimes I feel bad for kind of going after a low budget movie like this. I mean, the film does have some good performances going for it, I suppose. They're just not memorable characters. They might not necessarily be likable characters or necessarily memorable characters, but I thought the performances were of a decent standard. I thought the idea here is a good idea, and there were moments in the film where you're kind of thinking, okay, this looks like it's getting good now, but it never really fully delivers. I don't think it could be classed as what you would call a terrible film or anything like that. It's just, I mean, there's just so many found footage films. You've got to really stand out in the crowd with something unique. It's not hard to do in this subgenre where there's just so many found footage films kind of flooded the market over the last 15, 20 years. This is one that, unless you're a die-hard found footage film, I would probably suggest that you stay away from, if I'm honest. It's not memorable, and it's probably one of those found footage films that I'll struggle to remember in a couple of years, and generally speaking, I remember most found footage films that I watch. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this review. I'll be back with more content on the channel very, very soon.